Hello and good morning, everyone out there in webinar land. My name's Jeff. I'm the director here at Insight. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's Insight APSAD webinar. Before I go on, if I could just get you to move on the next screen. Thanks, Anna. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we're gathered here today and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We're sitting here in Meanjin on the lands of the Turrbal and the Yagara people, but I pay our respects to all of the lands in which guests are gathered here today, particularly here at the end of National Reconciliation Week. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Anna. Hi, Anna. Nice to see you. Anna Daglish is a family support worker with Family Drug Support, and she's recently undertaken a Master's by Research dissertation with the School of Human Services and Social Work at Griffith University, looking at the experience of families who've participated in their Stepping Stones kind of intervention program, and she's here to talk about it with us today. So as per usual, if you've got any questions or comments, drop it into the chat. I'll be monitoring that. If Anna doesn't answer those questions naturally through the course of her presentation, I'll ask her at the end. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Nice one. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Yes, I'm Anna. It's so good to be here today. Thank you for having me. I'm here to share some research that I've undertaken. I've got an agenda here for the presentation. I've got a couple of videos that I have included in my presentation today. One is a video on the Stepping Stones program, and it explains what the program does and also introduces some family members that have actually done the course. I want to talk about my motivation for the study because I think it's quite personal, and this whole work that we do with families, it's very personal. Then I'm going to present a video of the actual study that I did, then go on to recommendations for program improvement, assessing services, time for change, getting feedback on what the family said about how services can improve to support them so that they can support their family. I'm going to talk about limitations of the study, of course, conclusion, and then we'll jump into a discussion. If you've got any questions, please type them in the chat box and we will get to them. Okay, so introduction of the research. My name is Anna. I'm a mum. My lad turned 17 today, so very early start this morning. I'm going to present a qualitative retrospective study, which is the one that I did. Title is The Stepping Stones Program, The Family Perspective. This is nearly 3 years in the making, so I've been really, really working long and hard on this stuff. But I'm so excited to be here finally to present the findings from the study, from the horse's mouth, which is the families that we interviewed. So I'm going to now play the video presentation and have a look at Stepping Stones and see what it is. There's some lovely family members in here that express their experience. Okay, so do I push start? I think I do.
Stepping Stones is Family Drug Support's flagship program. It's a 28-hour course for parents or family members who are going through dealing with someone's drug and alcohol issues. We guide them through the whole process, from the early emotions of fear, guilt and grief and anger, through to learning skills on how to communicate better, how to have effective boundaries and how to keep themselves safe.
When our families come here for the first time, it is evident that they have tried everything they can to fix it and to stop it. And there is a sense of powerlessness and helplessness in that space. Families often find that, when they're in that space with other families, when they're listening to the shared experience of this, there's a shift and there is a sense of relief. That it's not just me, it's not just what I did or what I didn't do that brought this stuff on.
Just hearing how other people have been on the same but different journey was just a huge relief to really give me validation to all the things that I'd been feeling, and also Yeah, to know that I wasn't alone on this journey was really important.
But the workshop and the modules and the way in which it's delivered is just opens up a whole world of, well, you know, I'm not alone and I'm not the only one who's going through this, and all of these people in this group have got beautiful family members and they're all going through the same thing and they're all feeling the same as I do, and you're just that, you know, wonderful, you know, connectedness to people.
When we provide strategies around coping and resilience, when we bring in some education around harm reduction, when we look at some frameworks where the person is, where we are as a family member, we're all in different stages of space, stepping stones, there's a guided process that takes us through that stuff. And it really helps families come to terms with the reality of the situation. In a gentle way. We meet people where they're at. There are no rights or wrongs in this space. There's a right to pass in stepping stones, which is a very, very important philosophy for family drug support.
The Stepping Stones program really opened my eyes to the philosophy of harm reduction. And I didn't really understand it before Stepping Stones, so I found it incredibly helpful to see how this model actually has been hugely healing for my kids. You know, for me to come with understanding and compassion and to accept that this is happening and it doesn't even really matter why. Like, that was the other part. I was so stuck in the story of how did this happen to our family? And then when I looked around the circle and saw all these beautiful people from all different places and walks of life, I got that it doesn't really matter why. What matters is what can we do now to support our young people moving forward.
Families, from working in this space, that connection is a surefire way to get better outcomes. We know that tough love doesn't work.
I think what family drug support's done for me is helped me find a different way to deal with the situation. And there are a lot of other models out there that have different ways of dealing with things, but because of the person that I am, I couldn't do the harsh, cruel, you know, well, throw them out the house kind of thing.
The Stepping Stones was a complete re-education in the power of words that I had been using. From being clean and enabling and rock bottom and all of those, you know, words that you hear out in the world in association with drug use and drug addiction. That's what I was saying, and I understand how damaging that can be to someone who's on the receiving end of it, and just how they perceive themselves when they think of themselves as dirty versus clean. And also how if I was actually supporting my child in the best way that I could, that's not enabling, you know? And so I think those reframes were really powerful.
What family drug support has done for my family is probably allowed me to be a little bit more understanding, and it gave me a lot more knowledge that I didn't really have before, and it gave me probably a lot more compassion in the way in which I dealt with my family.
I can't think of anything better you could do than to do Stepping Stones. It will not necessarily produce drug-free, which is what a lot of families want, of course, but it will definitely give you skills and tips on how to deal with the issues. And we know from the evidence that if you do support the family, which is what Stepping Stones does, you will improve the outcome, not just for the family members, but for the substance user as well.
Nice one. Right. That was the presentation that we have on our website, and it's a really good insight, and it draws families in because they hear from other families about the power of the program. I want to talk about the motivation for this study. One of the most defining moments of my career working as a practitioner at Family Drug Support was when I took a call from a mother who informed me that her son had just died from a drug overdose. Her son had been wrestling with a methamphetamine addiction and was placed in a mental health unit to manage his condition through pharmacotherapy. I had worked with this mother for over a year in monthly support group meetings and had a particular affection for her, as our sons had the same first name. I would come home after these meetings and jump into bed with my little lad and hug him tightly, resting in the knowledge that right now my boy was safe and well. On reflection, this defining moment was a call to action for me, as I recognised the status quo for drug users and their families had to change. This research is a testimony to the courage and resilience of these families, and a nod to the contribution of Tony Trimmingham, Order of Australia, and Sandra Lyons, Order of Australia, who co-founded Family Drug Support and developed harm reduction interventions amidst a hostile landscape, most notably against the odds of prohibition. Now I'm going to present the video that I have done about the study, and it talks about the nuts and bolts of the study. In the study, I had 11 mums, 2 dads, and a grandmother that I did interviews with. So I will start this now. I will begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and their connections to land, sea, and community, and pay my respects to elders past and present. My name is Anna Daglish, and I'm here to present the findings of a study that I conducted in conjunction with Dr. Menka Tantevsky from Griffith University. I'm a student in the final stages of a Master's by Research dissertation from the School of Human Services and Social Work, with a particular focus on families and childhood studies. Dr. Menka Tantevsky has extensive experience working with clients who experience drug dependence and their families, and for many years worked at Odyssey House in Victoria as a researcher, manager of the Child and Family Program, and policy advisor. Her recent research examines the intersection of substance use, mental health, domestic violence, and child protection concerns. I'm a family support worker at Family Drug Support and present educational workshops within the community and sector, facilitate support groups, and deliver the Stepping Stones program for families. Affected family members play a critical role in supporting a relative experiencing substance dependence. Family Drug Support is an Australia-wide non-government organisation supporting families and provide a range of interventions to support families. Since 2001, Family Drug Support has delivered the psychoeducational program Stepping Stones to over 2,000 families. This study explores the experience of families who participated in the program with the aim of including their voices within the academic conversation, in policy, and in service delivery. Best and Lubman refer to the non-linear trajectory of recovery from addiction and acknowledge that relapse is a typical stage in the addiction cycle, and identified an average duration of 27 years from substance initiation to stable recovery in a study they undertook in treatment centres. This timeline is substantiated when we look at the statistics from the Australian Institute of Health reports capturing variation, drug topology and demographics, and certainly profile long-term drug use. And if we consider the early onset of drug use averaging around 14 years of age, and if we do the math, it takes us to 41 years of age. Our support groups are filled with older parents and grandparents who have been on this path for a long time. Australia operates a harm minimisation policy with a focus on supply, demand and harm reduction. Much of the discord exists in the proportion of funding that is distributed between the 3 pillars, and currently the national budget extends only 2% of funding towards harm reduction, which places a stranglehold on safety and effective recovery practices throughout Australia. There is over 2 decades of empirical research exploring the debilitating impacts on families who support a relative with substance dependence. Families grapple with the loss of potential of their loved one, of health risk and decline, of familial disruption, financial hardship, education and career derailment, domestic violence, punitive responses from the criminal justice system, and possible bereavement. A review of the literature suggests that family pathology, codependency, and family systems theory have dominated the treatment paradigm. The collective experience for families include managing the stress and strain resultant from the maladaptive behaviours of the addicted relative, and the seminal works of Capello, Orford, Velleman and Templeton developed the stress-strain coping model in the UK and the accompanying 5-step intervention. A little closer to home, Hero, Rose and Trimmingham developed the Stages of Change for Families model, and Tony Trimmingham created the accompanying Stepping Stones intervention for family drug support. My literature review revealed an absence of family perspectives on the efficacy of these programs, and herein lies the catalyst and entry point for this particular study. It is important to state that drug use is non-discriminatory. An explicit narrative within and across sectors is that drug use only impacts the disadvantaged, marginalised and underprivileged demographic. This narrative is stigmatising and misleading. Diversity within the group setting in relation to socioeconomic status, cultural background, parenting approaches, trauma stories and family constellation reflect the non-discriminatory nature of addiction. While normalisation of the experience and relief were currently reported, 5 participants revealed that protective factors were not enough to shield their relative from substance dependence. We live in a world where drug culture is glamorised and youth culture is bombarded incessantly through social media. The World Drug Report 2021 documented the growth and potency of illicit drugs and the increase of sales on the dark web as a forecast for unrelenting procurement of both licit and illicit drug consumption. Family drug support was established in Australia in 1997 and developed the Stages of Change for Families model in 2000. The Family Intervention Program Stepping Stones is a psychoeducational and experiential program to support families who are struggling with a dependent family member. This course is designed to help people turn crisis into coping. The crisis of living with drug use usually includes emotional pain. If the pain can be embraced and used as a motivator to adjust, focus and gain awareness and education, it can assist in strengthening relationships within the family. The goal of the course is not only to help families adjust and cope, but also to help them change and regain their own lives. Basic principles behind the theory of the course include solution-focused brief therapy and action learning methodology. Motivational interviewing and a strengths-based approach situated in anti-oppressive practice and trauma-informed care ensure that families are not only acknowledged but respected for their collective wisdom and recognition of expertise in their own family system. I undertook a retrospective qualitative study and applied interpretive phenomenological analysis to explore the experiences of family members who attended the Stepping Stones program delivered by Family Drug Support within Australia. The study employed purposive sampling of 14 participants, drawing data from interviews to interpret the phenomenon of families seeking support and how they experience support services. Interpretive phenomenological analysis is associated with ideography. Ideographic analysis focuses on the individual and is concerned with the particular. Individual experience is uniquely embodied, situated, and perspectival. This is in contrast with most psychology, which is nomothetic and concerned with making claims at the group or population level and with establishing general laws of human behaviour. Nomothetics is actuarial and probabilistic, dealing with group averages rather than individual cases. So why is this distinction important? Each person that I interviewed had a different story and a different perspective, and their relative was unique, with distinct character traits and preferences and nuances which had been ignored by a generalised treatment response with the application of nomothetic understanding. Miller and Moyers in 2014 identified over 1,000 randomised controlled trials for behavioural and pharmacotherapies in detoxification and treatment of all substance use disorders, and nearly half, or 47% of all published trials, had reported negative findings. What Miller and Moyers did highlight is the fact that the relational concept of empathy matters. Therapist empathy and the therapeutic alliance make the difference in successful treatment outcomes. If 47% of treatment interventions are failing, perhaps we need to rethink our approaches to include a more personalised, ideographic and relational engagement. The primary research question guiding the study was, what is the affected family member's experience of participating in the Stepping Stones program delivered by Family Drug Support in Australia? Quite simply, the transcripts from the interviews were love letters to their children. The interviews were demonstrations of enduring love, courage and resilience. As participant 8 stated, and so a long time ago, my wife and I made a commitment. Whatever happens, we will not give up. I have made a commitment. I'm never going to give up, and I am more committed to saving my son than he is to destroying himself. 4 key themes were abstracted from the data, and these were barriers to accessing support services, the power of connection, empowerment through education, and healing family systems. Discrimination and stigma compound the isolation experienced by families, and difficult emotions including fear, guilt, anger, shame, and grief have been well documented in the literature. Overall, participation in the Stepping Stones program loosened the grip of family pathology, which had immobilised many families from engaging in help seeking. Families had much to say about the barriers to accessing services, and the structural, social and cultural determinants of health beleaguered easy access to support services, and explicit examples of this included no fixed address for their relative, spiralling spur debts, discontinuity of care, and cost-prohibitive access to healthcare and contextual cultural marginalisation, legislation, action, non-disclosure, and crippled families with court appearances, family domestic violence orders, and incarceration, probation and parole. Family pathology disabled service engagement and was operationalised through stigma and discrimination from services and perpetuated through the media with messages positing moral failings, bad character, and lack of willpower, which continually silenced families. When relatives relapsed, families went into freefall and deeper isolation. Privacy and confidentiality completely ostracised families and exhausted their capacity to help their relatives. Lack of collaboration for dual diagnosis management adversely impacted holistic care and treatment and left families despairing, disempowered, and helpless. The power of connection. Folks with different postcodes, different trauma stories, different family constellations, but they were all there for the same reason. They wanted to help their relative who was experiencing substance dependence. There was an overwhelming sense of relief articulated throughout the interviews due to the normalising of the shared experience. Safety was a recurring theme that demonstrated the importance of trauma-informed practice and anti-oppressive practice. These folk had come in from the cold into a non-judgmental, empathetic and kind therapeutic environment. Empowerment through education. The program is content-rich on education and information on AOD cycles and processes for both the user and the family. We provide a range of frameworks that give people a roadmap to navigate this very rugged journey. Stepping Stones provides a guided process through the trans-theoretical model and the stages of change for families model, and the program is anchored in harm reduction education and initiatives. Various quotes from participants in the study which capture this experience are, "It helps you unjumble stuff, it opens up the field to you, it helped you order your thoughts and your thinking." Let me share a very powerful story of a mother and her estranged son who was in the grips of an ice addiction and was on a DVO to stay away from the family home. The mum was highly educated and just didn't know how to handle any of it. He turned up at her home in an intoxicated state, and she locked the crim-safe door to keep her other children safe. She is a mum, and so she ordered him pizza and fed her son. She then gave him a pillow and a blanket, and he went to sleep on the veranda outside. And she lay on the other side of that crim-safe door so she could be close to him. She is a mum. And she said in her interview that she learnt how to navigate crisis in Stepping Stones. She learnt about conflict resolution and de-escalation and boundary setting and keeping people safe, and it honoured their relationship. That is the power of Stepping Stones. Healing family systems. This was probably the most important outcome of my study, as I knew experientially that we were having success in the field on a daily basis with our families at Family Drug Support. But what I didn't know is, did the Stepping Stones intervention help families further down the track? Had it changed people's lives for the better? Was it a successful intervention? I will share a final story about a mum from a rural town who had 4 children and 3 of them were IV users for over 2 decades. Her story was filled with trauma and family breakdown and complete devastation. This mum had attended Stepping Stones twice, as in her words, she had to check twice that she had heard it right. This mother had tried every single thing that is available to try and fix her children, which is similar to every other family that comes to Family Drug Support. However, the fact that she had been on the journey for so long, she was ready to engage in letting go of control and moving towards acceptance. Lo and behold, this mother recounted that when she stepped back and started focusing on her own life, it gave her children the room to develop their own capacity. She finished her interview by saying that all her children had stopped using drugs and they'd spent a week together under the same roof enjoying a family holiday. Healing family systems. Families experience a reframe of stigmatisation and the reinstatement of self-agency and efficacy through boundary setting, conflict resolution and effective communication with their relative. Coping and resilience strategies build capacity within the family system. This program changes lives and, more importantly, keeps families together. This presentation is a call to action across sectors to collaborate in the recognition that an holistic approach is required to meet the needs of both the individual and families adversely impacted by drug use. Affected family members are marginalised by stigma. This research highlights the importance of educating health professionals on family inclusive and anti-oppressive practice and challenges systemic and culturally embedded discrimination against individuals and families affected by drug use. Let us not underestimate the power of empathy. We have a heck of a team here in Queensland in the AOD sector, and I know from my own counterparts across the country that they feel the same way. In a climate that is managed by risk, limited resources and key performance indices, we need to remember that people are on the end of our diagnosis, prognosis and service provision. At the end of the day, kindness matters. People matter. Thank you for listening. Right. Rallying the troops call. I've got a 27,000 page thesis if anyone wants to, find out a little bit more about that study. Okay. Recommendations for program improvement. So that was in from the families, their reflections on how we could improve stepping stones. One participant reflected on content overload. One participant found the group dynamic confronting. Two participants commented on the distraction of new recruits in training. One participant recommended that partners do the program at the same time. Two participants suggested changing the 4-day intensive delivery into a 10-week term to allow for more time to process the information. One participant suggested that they would like to hear more success stories about recovery, rehabilitation and detox. And there were several requests for a reunion program to reconnect with attendees and many requests for Stepping Stones Mark II. There was recurring reporting to not change a thing about the Stepping Stones program. And I think the fact that it was received so well is because these families had faced so many barriers out in the world. And when they came into a kind therapeutic environment, they just felt tremendous relief and safety, and within a harm reduction framework, to talk about the reality of drug use and acknowledging the fact that, folks relapse, how do we keep them safe in that space? So we were, the thing about Stepping Stones, it is anti-oppressive, it is trauma-informed, and we're talking about the reality of drug use. And it's a very, very safe space for our families. And I think that's why there was such a positive reflection on the program. Okay, so I thought this was a very interesting part of the study because, I asked how families thought that we could improve services across the sector. What could we do to help them help their person? And this quote, I think, really sums up the experience of stigma for families and, the sensationalist journalism reporting that totally ostracizes families in the media and people who use drugs. But her quote, I just think that there needs to be a lot more consideration of the people that want to support their addicted person or affected person. I think a lot of the time their feelings get lost. And also I think that there has to be a lot more empathy from the point of view of the families and what the families go through. Siblings go through just as much terrible time as the mum and dad do. And our family support groups, and Jeff could probably attest to this, they are filled with families in pain, trying to help their person and coming up against a lot of system limitation, a lot of discrimination, a lot of shame, a lot of stigma. So, really prioritising the feelings of these families is important, and that was a recommendation from the families. Time for assessing services. If we had the same support sitting within the mental health unit for people with drug issues as we do for the people with depression or schizophrenia, you need to have lots of resources because there is a hell of a lot more of them. We were sort of frustrated by the wall that they were putting up between my son's drug taking and his schizophrenia. So obviously this is talking about dual diagnosis management. Couple of points that I want to make about that. There is a collaboration between systems of care with mental health and AOD between those sectors. We have significant machinery of state in Australia, and specifically here in Queensland. We've got an amazing array of services, of training providers, of Insight, QNADA. All they do is review evidence-based research and then get it out into the sector. And it's an empowering environment to be in. And I feel a lot of hope for that in that space. It infuses hope. Okay, and the National Quality Treatment Framework 2019 to 2029, that's driving out the change in the sector, and it's an exciting space to watch from my perspective. Jeff, you might be able to talk about that as far as the Queensland situation goes, the latest developments in that space. Next one. Okay. If you can talk to someone, that is great support, but you need to talk to someone that is not going to judge you, or you just need a listening ear for a lot of it because there is no real solution. And that came from the grandma in my group. That's talking about anti-oppressive practice. That's talking about holding space for people, making it safe for them to engage, to disclose, to ask for support. Really, really important that we engage in active listening in the space with our families. Oh, and my favourite one of all time was, and I think it captures the essence of the challenge for every family that's trying to engage in support services. Just make it easy for them. This is about visibility of services. This is about one door policy, open door policy, making it easy. Families having to seek and secret squirrel their way into finding access to support services. It's not okay. We need to be shouting this stuff from the rooftops as far as support services go. It's such an important one, and we need collaboration, across systems of care to make it easy for them. Okay. This is a good one, education, right? We need to educate our support services because until they start treating these people like people, because that's what does the harm, When that first contact with the police, if they are treated atrociously, they are already curling up inside. They just curl up a little bit tighter, and then they use more, We need to educate. That was from the lovely Jennifer, anonymous name. This is about education. This is about reality of drug use. This is about harm reduction frameworks, supporting our families so that they can support their person. Study limitations. This is a very important acknowledgement. This was a small study, and an interpretive phenomenological analysis, so that typically they are small studies capturing the essence of the experience for the person. A standard sample is normally around 7 or 8. I did 14. As a brand new researcher, what was I thinking? But 300 pages of transcript and the findings that came from there. Wow, what an experience! What a privilege, and what a lot of really important information. The other big point about this study, it represents engaged, affected family members. So I think that distinction is extremely important, recognising that the families that come to us, they are looking for us. They are actively seeking us out. The study does not include disengaged affected family members, and there is the next project, right? Researcher bias, advocate of harm reduction and social justice, as I think we all are in this space. Unapologetically so. And, the beauty with interpretive phenomenological analysis is that as the researcher, I get to interpret the findings, what they're saying, and capture the essence of the experience. And hopefully through the study, gaining the phenomenological nod, capturing their voices. That was what mattered to me. When I was reading through the research, the literature, I had a visceral response because the families that I were reading about were not the families that I was dealing with, in the field. And that to me really motivated the study as well, because I just thought, this is not right. The map doesn't match the ground with all of this stuff. So researcher bias, yes, but, I think it's possibly in a good way. Theory of desirability, trying to people please. These families, potentially could have been, and that this is very real with research. We all want to, be friends and don't say anything that's going to offend anyone. My reflection on that is that the frankness in the study findings, the disclosures, the devastation, the horror, the pain, the suffering. I mean, those interviews are incredibly graphic, and I felt that they were very honest. And that was my reflection on the theory of desirability for this particular study. Okay, finishing up now. Future areas of research. Accessing disengaged affected family members, that is, my next big thing. Extending research to include longitudinal studies and more ideographic research to include affected family perspectives in the literature. And that focus on ideography, individuals, person-centered practice, that is best practice in this space in human services, and that was one thing that I have to say. When I started with family drug support, what I was learning in the classroom for best practice, these guys have been doing it for 25 years. Things like person-centered practice, trauma-informed care, anti-oppressive practice, evidence-based research, recognition that families hold their own expertise within their experience. This stuff, it's so kind. And it changes the game. So, conclusion, I'm gonna wind up now. Thank you for listening. But this study demonstrates that affected family members are empowered to support their relative with problematic substance use when they access a support intervention that prioritises trauma-informed care and anti-oppressive practice. The findings reflected affected family members experienced acceptance, dignity, and hope when they attended the Stepping Stones program. The findings reflected affected family members experienced relief, since now they had coping and resilience strategies based in harm reduction initiatives that could constructively assist their relative. I will conclude with the recognition that this study has captured and included affected family members' voice in the discourse, and I look forward to continue talking on behalf of our affected family members. So I think that is the end of my presentation, and over to you, Jeff. Good chat.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. That was great, and congratulations on such an in-depth and obviously a labour of love over the last number of years, getting deep and personal with those families to collect those stories. So congratulations, well done. Lots of comments of congratulations and thanks in the chat as well. And I'll just go to a few comments and questions. One of the earlier comments was around, it was actually from Mark talking about from his own lived experience, whether or not the representation of some in the social media in the news of success stories of recovery would challenge some of the narrative or that stigma and discrimination, and whether you would agree.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And you know, that is such an important comment and reflection. And, you know, I think there's a lot of campaigns driving the reframe of stereotypes. And there are campaigns out in the sector, you know, and I could even put my hand on it right now. Okay, challenging the media's approach of sensationalizing the drug problem is a continuous recommendation to remedy the perpetuation of stigma. And that was Cunard's position paper on stigma and discrimination. The Queensland Mental Health Commission emphasised the impact of negative language sustaining discrimination and stigma in their Changing Minds, Changing Lives initiative. And the New South Wales Network of Alcohol and Other Drugs, NADA, and the New South Wales Users and AIDS Association developed a resource, Language Matters to Combat Stigma. Now, so what you're talking about, reframing those success stories, absolutely. This is so personal. It's about families, and it could be any one of us. And that's why this is such an important conversation, opening up the discussion to the reality that it could be any one of us. So yes, thank you. That's a great question.
Particularly acknowledging the risks that some of these people do in disclosing their stories because of that pervasive kind of stigma and shame out there. Like,
absolutely.
Acknowledge when people do take that risk and do that, just how much that helps all of us in this cause. Yes. So thanks, Mark, and thanks for following that up. And to the families, I guess, who've featured in that video as well. Clara from New Zealand, we have a long reach here,
nice.
Has a question about how do you support attendance to family support groups? Like, how do you support family members to get there? And is there any difference between face-to-face and online attendance?
Okay, well, you know what? And I reflected on this because part of the when I did the literature review, there was a lot of literature on online service delivery, which obviously a byproduct of our whole COVID experience. Unexpected, amazing development from COVID was this online development. So what that means, we have online support groups for that modality. Yes, and we've actually been doing it, and I think they're quite wonderful because, you know, you don't have to leave home. You're in the safety of your own home, you know, and it's, you know, Brady Bunch management, but so good because you have the safety of home. The only challenge with doing a support group from home is if our person's living with us. And then keeping that safety for our person and dignity for everyone, that's such an important understanding when we're talking about online. But for the actual psychoeducational program, Stepping Stones, because it is experiential, because it is so personal, it has to be an in-person experience. We do our Stepping Forwards, which are our, you know, little 2-hour information education sessions, which are so important, but that's like the feeder into Stepping Stones. And we do those online as well. But yes, definitely online stuff is the way to go for that open door policy of connection. You betcha. Yeah.
Thanks. And there's a couple of comments and questions around just difficulty in accessing services. Jess Holman and also Barrett has just suggested or made a comment about how to, you know, particularly when families feel like, and this isn't an inpatient but ward perspective, that fear, guilt and shame about, I have no idea where I went wrong, and how do they navigate a service system to support them when that happens.
Yes.
You know, for that family, given that a lot of the attention is on the individual. We know that services, that we've got a 50% service gap across the country in terms of for people who require treatment, who want it now, let alone for family members.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, this is potentially an opportunity for a plug, but like, where do you point family members in these situations?
Yes. You know what? I think one of the interesting bits is there's a couple of things I want to speak to. One is Redbourne Referral Services, Queensland Police, right? In that height of crisis when, you know, it's all going down and there's a very, you know, challenging situation happening, Redbourne Referral Services have been amazing in their referral process to family drug support. it's almost as though FDS is kind of like the end of the line when we've tried everything else, and of course it comes to crisis, because that's what happens in this space because of the legislation and our systems of care, and the criminal justice system, the punitive response, and our challenge with actually delivering rehabilitation. Those challenges impact the family to get support instantly, timely support. So what they do is they come to us in crisis because they haven't been able to fix it upstream because of system limitation. So what happens? Visibility from services across systems of care, and I'm talking child protection, DV, police, criminal justice system, every single area that's involved in this conversation needs to know that these services exist for families. I mean, it's a national organisation, and the other thing is there are amazing support groups out there for families. They've just got to get online and Google. But these are engaged families. We're not talking to the disengaged family, and that's a whole nother ball game of very, very important work that needs to continue. But right now it's about engaged families. So my plea to the sector is to share this information, share it, and let us take the call. And I say to our families, 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't breathe, pick up the phone and ring that 24-hour support line. You don't know where your kid is, pick up that line. There's going to be someone there that will talk you up and down your U-curve. And the other big thing that I want to say, which I think is so important, this is about non-directive support. I'm going to say that again, non-directive support. It is not about, and this is the power of anti-oppressive practice and trauma-informed care, is that you do not tell people what to do. You recognise they are the expert in their life. Here is a load of information and education. There is no directive in this space, but here is some information. And the crux of that is the power of this program and the good thing about family drug support. But anyway, there's lots of services out there that can support families.
And I'll probably just add to that as well, for families who are a bit reluctant to speak to someone or rock up to a group, they can always just check out FDS online, where they can get a sense of some of the conversations and the natures of the group first, and then until they're ready. So FDS online, if you go to the FDS website.
Yes. And the other thing that I thought was and this was actually part of my revelation in the study, was that, we've got this idea that through stereotyping, through media representation, that it, just impacts a certain demographic, and that's another conversation that I really want to get into, but not here. But our families, when they sit in circle, and this is so important, when you sit in circle and you've got families with different family constellation, different trauma story, different parenting approaches, different postcodes, right? But lo and behold, we're all here for the same reason, which is to take care of their kid, to help their person. When families get into that space, light goes off, because it's, hang on a minute, it's not because my divorce took my kid out, or it's not because I worked too hard, or it's not because I was a helicopter parent, or it's not because I pushed them too hard through school. All of a sudden, those conversations lighten, loosen. Then we can focus on help and support and constructive moving forward. That's what Stepping Stones does in spades. And that was the outcome of the findings from this study, was we saw that. Which is so exciting.
So good. And I mean, there's a question here. Have you seen better outcomes for the actual, the person who uses substances when the affected family members are engaged in programs like Stepping Stones?
Yes. And can I tell you, our favourite thing is when we don't hear back from people for a while. We are like, when someone doesn't turn up, it's a good news day for us, right? And the other thing is, when I ring around our families and I speak to, like the other day I rang Central Queensland family list, and I got 3 families who'd said, our kid's good, we're still members, but he's good. We've got nothing to report here. They are my favourite phone calls. And you know what? I remember going to a recovery seminar once on the coast, and all of these amazing people were telling their stories of recovery. And I remembered thinking, and I said to them in that forum, I said, if I could transplant you guys into our support rooms, just so that you could see recovery is a thing. It does happen. You betcha it does. And we need to share those stories. They're so important. So important.
And your passion and enthusiasm is really infectious, I have to say. And some comments about that in the group as well.
Oh, gosh. Thank you. But what an important conversation, isn't it? For all of us, for every single one of us. And the thing that I think is the biggest reflection of the study, and this is called lived experience. When we join the dots of all the stuff that's out there, and then we go into places like Parliament House and we think, okay, everyone else is on board except Parliament, right? Except the government, because of the Conservative electorate. Okay, that's our stumbling block. You know what? The amount of pollies that have come up to me and whispered in my ear and said, oh, me too, family. This is non-discriminatory. There is movement in this space. There is traction. There is so much. And I say machinery of state. Australia has invested truckloads of money to try and sort this problem, to help this problem along. There's never been a better time to be in this space, I reckon. That's my reflection. Lots of hope. Lots of hope.
I agree. Last couple of comments, some lamenting that there's not more alcohol and drug and mental health training within kind of undergraduate degrees and training courses that people...
You betcha.
Yeah,
you betcha.
With totally
with the focus on anti-oppressive practice and trauma-informed care and idiographic practice as opposed to nomothetic application. Because when we go blanket, nomothetic, diagnosis, prognosis, treatment, we can get into a world of trouble. And this, I think, with that 47% failure rate, hey, these are our kids. These are our brothers and our sisters and our mums and our dads. So let's just take a breath with the positive biomedical model and the nomothetic prognosis. And let's just go person-centered practice. Every individual matters.
Yep, Sarah. And look, one of the things we're trying to do here at Insight is go out and give guest lectures at a lot of undergraduate courses in nursing, social work, psychology, OT, just to kind of go, hey, consider a career in AOD, because we know it doesn't feature substantially in those courses. So, and we hope that might inspire a few people to pursue it and actively pursue it.
Yeah.
I think, look, there's a few other comments, a lot of people just thanking you for your work and your enthusiasm and your passion. I'll probably wrap it up there just because I think that's where we're up to. Go check out the FDS website. Contact Anna if you want to find out more about her research. Congratulations again on the effort. Yes, you can collapse in a heap now.
Yeah, I know, right? Totally.
You've got a group run or something later on, but anyway. So thanks, Anna. I really appreciate you giving us your time and sharing your wisdom and the stories of those families with us today. I think it's really, really important that you and others keep doing that as part of our work. Absolutely. So thanks again. Next week, we have a presentation from Hazy in September on sex work, alcohol, drug and mental health. So tips for workers around working with sex workers. So tune in at the same time next week for that. Thanks, Anna. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.